In higher ed, we're all looking for big wins, but reducing a 75% application abandonment rate and achieving a 90% conversion rate, that's next level transformation. Michael Battersworth, CMO at Texas State Technical College, shares how they achieved this by streamlining the application process with Element 451.
Our Element journey began out of a necessity. We were switching to a new SIS, and the application process was going to pose some real usability issues for us. We felt that application was going to hamper our enrollment. So we began quickly to evaluate different CRMs, different applications. So for context on that, our conversion rate with the prior application had about 75% abandonment of people clicking apply to submit. And the first weeks after going live with Element, we saw an 80% conversion, and that's now up to 90. So improving the usability of that application on the front-end process has had a significant advance in our intake.
When technology works for students, it works for you. Visit element451.com to see how simplifying the application process with artificial intelligence will lead to significant results for your institution. Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. I'm really excited for this episode because it came about in an interesting way that our guest just reached out to me with what I would call kind of a hot take on just sort of something relating to higher ed tech and how institutions sort of can respond to, the plethora of tools that like students and staff members are using nowadays. How do they make sure that those tools are being well supported and everything? So I appreciated that you came to me. You came with a point of view, with something that you wanted to talk about. So I'm excited for this episode. But Chris, if you want to just kick us off as usual, just with a brief intro of your background. And if you want to also kind of just merge in, kind of explaining a little bit more about your current role at your organization, Transact.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I love to get to talk about the things that I do. So my name's Christopher Schmidt, Global Director for Client Support at Transact Campus. Especially, I've led the last decade leading high-stakes support teams across higher education and healthcare. Straight out of high school, became United States Marine, so structure, accountability, urgency are really baked into kind of how I lead my teams. Funny enough, I also served as a firefighter, which taught me how to stay calm when everything around us is on fire, which literally or metaphorically applies. So I'm a real stickler for details, checklists, systems, making sure everything's in order. So in Transact, that mindset helped us shape scalable support frameworks like Campus Commerce Platinum Plus, Payments Managed Services, Transact Hospitality Suite.
Yeah, and I think just with this kind of topic, and my next question will be for you to kind of deliver, what I'm sort of jokingly calling like sort of your hot take of just sort of like, I think this present state, but like, I think just like this topic writ large, I think it's interesting, when you proposed it was just like, we've not specifically talked about this as much as we talk about just sort of like digital transformation, all the tools and things that, student and staff and faculty and everybody's using, just they're going to need support. Things go wrong. People, need some extra guidance or whatever else. So the idea of higher ed institutions, just the idea too, that there are these large organizations, just the volume of needs of, how many people and then all the different tools that each of those people are using. Like there's like a volume capacity, there's a kind of complexity or sort of, variety and everything. So I appreciate you coming on to talk about it. But I think you presented to me, this sort of perspective on the present state and the current challenges that institutions are facing when it comes to their tech support. So if you kind of want to give us a little bit more in that sort of lay of the land, because, you spoke to sort of like kind of how you fit into supporting generally. But if you want to drill down a little bit more specifically on those, on the present state and the current challenges that institutions are facing when it comes to their tech support.
Sure. It's holistically, from all the different trends, all the different conversations that we have face to face with our clients, the vibe, I guess the best word I would be able to describe it with is tense. So it's the simplest way to put it. Schools are being forced to make some really tough decisions right now. Where to allocate headcount, what roles stay internal, which systems get sunset. All this is happening while students expect that seamless digital experience 24/7. And what we're hearing from campuses is that, when they're looking at the financial aspect, they're not just losing staff, they're losing that deep product knowledge that, they've had for years. And that's where the real risk is. It's not about filling a role. It's about replacing that expertise that person happened to hold on campus. So when you have someone that's just making it work for years and they leave, there's often really no playbook that they leave behind. And institutions are starting to ask, what's the smartest way to kind of fill that gap without hiring a full team?
Yeah, and that's sort of like, a bit of like what I wanted to ask about next. We can kind of just sit with this a bit of just this sort of present state and the current challenges, because I think it was like, I wanted to make sure I gave space for both sort of like where we are now and how we got here. And I think you kind of were getting at both of those, because I think it is that idea that, this being kind of this unfortunate casualty of like kind of this present moment is like, there's obviously always going to be kind of natural turnover, but like there could be maybe this misguided perception that like today's students are just, digital natives. They just understand how everything works and whatever else. Maybe we don't need to staff up support as much or whatever else, or we just have like, chatbots do everything for us, or, some of these notions where I think if you're going too far on kind of that side of thinking, you're making a lot of, perhaps sacrifices that you're just not aware of until it's too late. So if you want to kind of extrapolate any more on sort of like any of those sort of notions of like the context of how we got here, or, what's maybe kind of extrapolating or kind of, exacerbating these problems. I think the other thing I'd be curious about is just because I think there's a couple of different dynamics at play, sort of just like what higher ed looks like today versus 10, 20 years ago in terms of their digital footprint. So I feel like it's maybe just a confluence of all these things coming together, but anything that kind of sticks out to you as really like important context for how we got here with these present challenges.
Yeah, and actually I'd say you're right on point. So it's been kind of like this perfect storm that we've seen since really 2021. So tech advancement, which is a beautiful thing. Pandemic acceleration, which detrimental to a lot of campuses nationwide. And now a lot of financial pressure you're seeing in the domestic market, right? So institutions have spent years investing in front-end systems, all the tech, all the latest, but the back end, meaning the support, staffing, ops continuity, never really kept up with that. So we're seeing a gap widen where support's traditionally been treated kind of as the line item. And as its leaders start looking at where to tighten budgets, usually support is the first place that they're going to look on campuses. So here's the catch. If your support structure starts to crumble, your ability to deliver on those tech investments starts unraveling with it. So what we've done is kind of put in that new path, one that helps campuses shift from that reactive staffing model to more of the strategic partnership that flexes with the need. Honestly, I think a lot of campuses that are having interactions with us and adopting this with us are pretty relieved to see that there's already that support model that's starting to exist.
Yeah, and I guess some of the other factors, if you're able to sort of speak to this maybe briefly, is like, because I think that like tech acceleration piece, for me, top of mind is the idea that like, online courses, online learning, like that, is kind of the big driver where like, oh, yeah, you have our learning management system, in-person courses, maybe use them, maybe don't, but then but now there's more of, I think, a wholehearted embrace of an LMS for every course, but then there's some students who are remote, maybe, hundreds of miles away, and just, it's just the idea that like more students are interacting with, more like fully online courses and maybe a lot of embedded technology in the LMS to kind of amplify that experience. And then the other part of it of like, because I think, it's the tech acceleration, just more kind of interactions with more tools, but then like increasing like adult learners, the idea that be like, well, last time I was in school was like 30 years ago or something. So like just even that idea of like, I've never learned in an environment like this, like period. So like the idea of like, I'm going to need access to like high quality responsive support and that sort of thing. So I don't know if there's like those sort of dynamics of like, because I feel like we kind of like zoomed in a lot right now of like, okay, you're this one institution, you have more adult learners who like, this is just a very foreign concept. So they need more support with all of these more things that you have on your campus. So like, just anything, I guess, that you'd want to kind of speak to there.
Yeah, like I said, you're very in tune with what we're saying. The demographic, the end user demographic for college students anymore in higher ed is so varied. It can be folks straight out of high school. They have a wealth of tech knowledge, and on the opposite side of that, you have folks that due to either market constraints or downsizing, depending on their job field and vertical, they're coming back into a system that is completely foreign to them. So being able to put structure in place that's easily accessible, easily understandable, and easily operatable is really, really critical for higher education.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, it's just this like very interesting perfect storm that like, all these things that we've kind of talked about and all these other episodes or whatever else, it's like, it's coming to a crux for this, kind of functional piece of the whole ecosystem of higher ed that, institutions, have to sort of acknowledge and understand. And I think, it is like IT teams at institutions are just gaining more prominence and more responsibility and more of a seat at the table. And I think that idea of, certainly it's trying to like do more with less, but you may just need to do, kind of adapt. And if it's like, well, if we only have these resources, maybe we can now kind of shift and do, kind of come at this with a whole new approach. And like, speaking of like chatbots, whatever else, I think it's like, there's a lot of different tools like that or sort of approaches that can sort of augment what you're doing. But I think you can't just obviously fully automate all of your support or whatever else. It's like, that could be a part of the mix, but just, with all that being said, I think there's a lot of tough dynamics and different things going on, but like what are some of the approaches that you're seeing institutions use to confront these challenges effectively?
So what's working are the models that are reducing that risk and unlocking capacity without ballooning cost. And ultimately cost is king in every higher institution, higher education, banking models, in our day-to-day lives. So we've seen schools get huge lift from like managed services, premium offerings, because they're not just buying extra hands. They're getting that embedded expertise, and expertise rules the world. A technical account manager that knows their environment, speaks their language, and is accountable for outcomes. So the difference is instead of support being more of a call center, it's that continuity and institutional knowledge. It doesn't walk out the door when someone retires on campus. The real shift is in rebuilding in-house. Every time there's turnover or a new initiative, campuses are starting to build around trusted long-term partnerships. That approach gives them breathing room and it gives them a competitive edge.
Well, and I guess just as much as you're aware, I mean, do you think that this is just another instance of like higher ed sort of catching up to like industry and other like the business sector and everything? 'Cause I think that's often what you see, I think, with technology is that like education is sort of a lagging adopter. Like, is this sort of like a uniquely contoured sort of like, the strategies you're seeing here? Like, is this kind of uniquely contoured to the education space, or do you feel like it's sort of following the lead of kind of what the rest of the marketplace is doing?
I think we're going to see it more widely across the market itself. So I think it's human nature that as we get more and more advanced in our tech, our inclination is to really rely heavily on that without remembering the folks that are actually holding that tech up, that know it well, know how to operate it, how to optimize it, and how to make it something that you forget about in the day-to-day because it's operating seamlessly.
Yeah, because that is, I guess, a core part of, whatever strategy a higher ed institution or a corporation or whatever implements is that like, there still has to be people that like help to operate and troubleshoot and support the technology, even as great and, kind of improving continuously, automation or whatever else and different things are like, and that's people can maybe sort of do sort of self-service kind of support with like, certain things, but like, yeah, that you do need to, like, I think there is that perfect harmony of like, okay, you have a chatbot, somebody can kind of engage with that. If it's an issue that it can't resolve, it hasn't really optimized kind of workflow to, get a ticket into somebody, and maybe that's kind of a distributed team of people or whatever else, but like, that there are people, there is kind of humans in the process, and that there is this ability to just be as responsive as possible with as high of quality of support. Because I think kind of what I'm hearing from you too is it's not like you said, some sort of call center thing where it's just sort of like a sea of people. You kind of just like, throw the chum out there and whoever kind of catches it, whatever. It's just like, no, it's dedicated people that like understand, I think in our context here, it's like, okay, I'm kind of assigned to X university. I know their tech stack. I understand that like, they maybe have predominantly online adult learners, and, we can kind of maybe try to tailor our support that way. Like, but at least, I mean, that's just what it sounds like to you from what you're saying to me. Like, that is the direction that institutions are starting to head in. And I think it is sort of more of what I think you're going to see moving forward, or just more of kind of a role model, or sort of like a North Star for institutions to follow to, address a lot of the challenges you're noting. So I think that may be kind of part of the hesitation, if a school has not made cuts yet, because they're like, well, what's on the other side or whatever. It's like, we can adapt. We can, try to like leverage your resources in a way that doesn't sacrifice quality and everything. So I think it's just an interesting dynamic, I guess, but kind of getting sort of creative, with solutions here to really kind of achieve those sort of core goals when it comes to like, tech support.
We're always, just like anybody else, a tech company specific, we're looking at chat, we're looking at AI, we're looking at all the different innovations in the market daily. We want to do it better than anybody else, as long as we're not sacrificing quality, because when it comes to support specific, a chatbot isn't going to understand the nuance of somebody that's having an urgent situation. They may understand trigger words and, keywords that are going to indicate urgency, but in reality, us knowing personally what's going on with the campus, what their goals are for the year, what they're trying to achieve within that quarter, that personal contact, you can't replicate it with tech today. And, as we keep struggling to get there, and I believe one day we will, we're trying to make sure that we're putting the best possible outcomes for our clients out there in the day-to-day.
Yeah. Well, and I think just to kind of segue to my final question here, but like the idea of, just from what I'm hearing, this sort of advice or sort of guidance, even just sort of like in a simple kind of bullet point, is that like, when it comes to tech support, it can't just be one thing. Like, it is going to be a marbling of sort of like, chats, automation, people, robust FAQs, so people hopefully can kind of find their own answers. Like the idea of like, it's not just going to be, well, if we don't have people, then I guess we have to just offload and automate everything. Or if it's not like people that are like literally in a campus office somewhere, there, then we're not going to have any people. It's like, well, you can like, again, like work with partners and all that. Like, I think there's just like, I think with a lot of things, it's, understanding where you are, where you want to get to, and that like, as an institutional leader, that there's options, like there's a variety of paths. And again, a mix of, these various kind of methods here. And I don't know. So I think it's just like you said, like you just want to always keep sort of like the grounding on quality, because I think there is just like the temptation of kind of racing to the bottom with, certain things, especially just in a climate of tight budgets and things. But, I'll give you, sort of the final word here, just your kind of advice or resources or things on this topic that you'd want to share out with people to kind of wrap up the episode and kind of pull everything together.
For any major company out there, whether higher ed, healthcare, business and industry, don't treat support like an afterthought. And it's not just about fixing bugs or answering phones for, these folks. It's the heartbeat of your tech ecosystem. So if your support structure fails apart, everything falls with it. From VPs, CIOs, if they're listening, take a look at your team and ask yourself, if you have your two strongest people walk out tomorrow, what's your backup plan? If that question makes your stomach drop, it's time to rethink things. So at Transact, we put a lot of energy into building these systems to help institutions weather these types of storms. So if anything I said today kind of resonates, whether you're at a school, company, somewhere in between, we'd love to connect with you. We're here solving real problems with real people in real time, and it's just the beginning.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate just your sort of opening yourself up, because I always love just, hoping that folks really kind of keep the conversation going on any topic for any episode. And just that notion of like, that this is not an afterthought, because I think you kind of alluded to this before, but the idea of it is one of those things that people take for granted and don't notice unless it's not working. Like the idea of certain things, like, because I always think about like, if you like watch a movie or a TV show or different things, and if there's like weird things with the sound or the music or whatever, like you're like, wait, what is that? What is going on here? Like you don't notice it unless it's like really bad. And sometimes you kind of take it for granted when it's actually like really good or immersive or whatever else. So I think that idea of like, just having like reliable Wi-Fi and that all the apps and tools that I need to use, there's always going to be like loading up really quick and ready to go and all those sort of things. Like, I think, whether you are a student at an institution or a leader, faculty and staff at your institution, yeah, it's just kind of like taken for granted, and you don't really maybe fully appreciate what goes into kind of keeping everything working. And yeah, like that backup plan and whatever else. Because I think this whole conversation, and it is another whole episode that I hope that we can get to soon. But like the whole idea of like cybersecurity, like we're in a climate where like these things happen. So it's like you got to have like the backup plan of like how are you going to be able to like coalesce and kind of bring people together to like resolve those type of issues that I think are just becoming more common. So I think there's a lot of like headwinds and different things that are you had outlined, and then that's just sort of a whole other can of worms and everything. But like I think it's time well spent to be doing that sort of introspection, that exploration, that understanding of like where are we, where do we need to get to, and how are we going to get there, and understand that there's a lot of options. But certainly folks like yourself and everything are committing themselves to fighting the good fight here and helping to navigate this perfect storm that we're in. So I really appreciate your time, all that you shared. We'll certainly have ways to connect with you and Transact in the show notes and description for the episode here. But just appreciate you reaching out and jumping in for this conversation. It was great.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate even being able to have a voice. So appreciate being able to share my thoughts. I love it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly in your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.